You keep pretending you do not know what is wrong. And that is the funniest part because you know it so well. You have built a small museum around it in your head with carefully labeled exhibits and soft lighting and excuses that sound mature when you say them out loud. But you walk through those halls at night and you touch the glass and you feel the truth humming underneath, don't you? You feel it like a wire under the skin, like something that never stops vibrating. And you hate it because it never lets you fully relax. So you bargain with it. You distract it. You feed it little treats and little stories and little screens and little bursts of comfort. And you call that getting by. You call that coping. You call that being realistic. And then you wake up and realize you have been realistic for years. And all it has done is make you smaller, quieter, easier to ignore, even by yourself. And you still act surprised when your own reflection looks like someone who forgot what they wanted. Someone who used to have a fire and now has a pile of ash they keep stirring. Hoping a flame will politely appear without effort, without heat, without sacrifice, without choosing. Because choosing would mean admitting you wasted time, and you were terrified of that. You were terrified of the math, of adding up the hours you offered to comfort instead of growth, to noise instead of skill, to approval instead of character. And I can see you trying to keep your face steady while that thought presses its thumb into your ribs because you are not lazy. Not really. You are exhausted from carrying two lives at once. The life you show people and the life you hide from them. The life of I'm fine and the life of I'm falling behind. And you have been balancing those two lives so long you started calling the imbalance normal. You started calling the ache just how adulthood feels. You started calling your own potential a childish dream. And what a clever trick. What an elegant little betrayal. To call your own hunger immature so you can starve without guilt. To call your own standards unrealistic so you can lower them without shame. And then you wonder why you cannot look yourself in the eyes for very long. Why you keep busy. Why silence feels like a courtroom where every promise you broke takes the stand. And don't you dare tell me you do not know what I'm talking about, because you remember the exact moment you began to settle, the moment you realized you could survive without becoming who you said you would be, and you told yourself survival was enough. And maybe it was for a season, maybe it was necessary, but you turned the season into Al lifestyle. You turned emergency mode into identity. You turned I'll rebuild later into a long, slow surrender. And you kept smiling through it because smiling is polite. Smiling keeps people comfortable. Smiling gets you invited back. And you have been trained to be invited back more than you have been trained to be free. You want the world to stop asking things of you, but you keep volunteering your soul for tasks that do not even matter to you. You keep performing competence while neglecting conviction. You keep polishing the outside of a life you do not respect in the inside. And the worst part is, you are not fooled by it. You are just participating, because participation is less painful than confrontation, and confrontation would demand you stop lying to yourself about what you have been avoiding. So you call it procrastination, as if it is a scheduling issue, as if it is a calendar problem, as if a new planner and a fresh week and a clever app would fix the ancient thing inside you that flinches at effort. Not because you cannot do it, but because you are scared of what it means. If you try with everything you have, and the world still does not clap, still does not notice, still does not reward you the way you imagined it should, and you have been living with that fear, like a tenant you never evict. You have been paying it rent with your attention, with your hours, with your energy, with your self-respect. And then you act confused when you feel poor inside. Listen, you do not need another burst of motivation. You do not need another dramatic speech. You do not need a perfect morning routine that turns you into a different person by Tuesday. You need something far less glamorous, something almost insultingly simple. You need to tell the truth about what you do each day. Not what you intend, not what you promise, not what you post, what you actually do. Because your life is not made of your feelings. It is made of your repetitions. And right now your repetitions are building a cage with very nice wallpaper. And you keep calling it home because at least it is familiar. You want to be disciplined, but you keep treating discipline like a mood, like a special weather that must arrive before you can move. And so you sit there waiting for the sky to change, and the sky does not care. It never did. It never will. Because the sky is not your leader. You are, and you have been abdicating. You have been letting impulse run the meeting, letting comfort write policy, letting distraction decide the agenda. And then you blame the day as if the day had hands that grabbed you, as if the day forced you to scroll, forced you to snack on attention, forced you to chase. Novelty until your mind feels like a room full of open tabs, all humming, none finishing, all demanding, none fulfilling. Look at me. Don't drift. You already know you can do hard things because you have done them when you had to, when there was a deadline, when there was a consequence, when there was a person watching, when there was a fear sharp enough to move you. So the ability is not the issue. The issue is that you do not treat your own future like a real consequence. You treat it like a story you can rewrite later. You treat tomorrow like a forgiving friend. But tomorrow is not a friend. Tomorrow is a bill collector, and it always arrives, and it never forgets what you spent. You want to change without discomfort. You want growth without strain. You want to become someone you respect without disappointing the version of you that clings to ease. And that is the quiet truth no one told you, that you cannot keep everyone inside you happy. You cannot keep the comfort seeker satisfied and the builder fulfilled at the same time. One of them has to lose authority, and you keep letting the wrong one hold a microphone because it sounds kind. It sounds soothing. It sounds like compassion. But it is not compassion to keep yourself stuck. It is neglect with a soft voice. It is abandonment wearing a warm sweater. And you know it because every time you promise yourself tomorrow, you feel that tiny drop in your chest, that tiny betrayal, that tiny fracture. And those fractures do not heal with optimism. They heal with action, small, consistent, almost boring action that proves you are not just a person with thoughts. You were a person with standards. You do not need to punish yourself. You do not need to drown in regret. You need to stop treating regret like a personality and start treating it like a signal. Because regret is not a throne. It is a signpost. It points and then it expects you to walk. And if you keep sitting under it, you are not reflecting. You are just hiding in intelligence, using self-awareness as a hiding place. Because thinking about change is easier than changing. And talking about discipline is easier than being disciplined. And consuming content about productivity is easier than producing anything that would make you proud. And you have been feasting on the easier versions for so long you forgot the taste of earned peace. The kind that comes when you lay your head down at night and there is no secret argument between you and you. No silent accusation, no quiet disgust. Just the calm of a person who did what they said they would do, even when they did not feel like it. That calm is not reserved for special people. It is reserved for consistent people. And consistency is not a personality trait. It is a practice. It is a skill. It is a decision you make again and again until it becomes your posture, until your habits start obeying you instead of negotiating with you. And yes, you will fail sometimes. You will wobble. You will miss days. You will make mistakes because you are a human, not a machine. But the difference between someone who rebuilds and someone who repeats the same year forever is not perfection. It is ownership. It is the moment you stop explaining and start correcting. The moment you stop narrating your pain and start converting it into structure. The moment you stop demanding the world understand you and start demanding you lead you. You have been starving for focus, like it is some rare resource, like it is hidden in a mountain cave guarded by mythical creatures, and yet you hand it away every day to the loudest thing in the room. You donate it to alerts and trending topics and endless opinions that do not improve your life. You let strangers rent space in your mind, and you call it being informed. You let the world tug at your sleeve every 5 seconds, and you call it staying connected. But you are not connected. You are scattered. You are stretched thin. You are divided into so many tiny fragments of attention that none of them can build anything real. And then you wonder why your work feels heavier, why learning feels slower, why you cannot finish what you start, why you start doubting your intelligence as if your mind suddenly became weak, when really your mind is just overfed on novelty and undertrained in depth. Like a muscle that only ever lifts light, flashy weights for show, and never does the slow, quiet repetitions that actually make it strong. You do not lack talent. You lack containment. You lack boundaries. You lack the ability to sit in silence with a task long enough for it to open up and reveal its secrets, because deep focus is not a mood. It is a room you build. And right now you keep leaving the door open and acting surprised when chaos walks in without knocking. You want to feel inspired before you begin. But inspiration is a visitor. It does not pay rent. It is unreliable. It arrives late and leaves early. And if you keep depending on it, your life will keep depending on luck. And luck is a terrible manager. It will schedule your breakthroughs on days you are too tired to show up. So you have to do something that feels almost offensive to your emotions. You have to start before you feel ready. You have to begin while you still feel messy. You have to work while your mind is whining. You have to create order before you feel calm. Because calm is often the result, not the prerequisite. And you have been waiting at the wrong end of the process, like someone standing at a closed door, insisting it open before you reach for the handle. Listen, attention is your currency, and you keep spending it, like you are trying to get rid of it, like you secretly believe your hours are cheap. But your hours are the only thing you cannot replace. And one day you will understand that with a clarity that will make you feel cold, not because life is cruel, but because life is honest, and you have to become honest too. Honest about what drains you, honest about what feeds you, honest about which habits are relaxation and which habits are sedation. Because there is a difference. There is a difference between rest that restores you and noise that numbs you. And you know the difference the moment you put the screen down and feel emptier than before. The moment you take a break and somehow return more tired. The moment you chase a quick hit of entertainment and then feel impatient with the slow work that actually changes you. And yes, the world is designed to steal your attention. It is designed to keep you clicking and reacting and comparing. But that is not an excuse. That is a battlefield map. And you have been walking into the field unarmed, unplanned, unguarded, and then blaming the arrows for flying. So here is what you do. And you do it without drama, without announcing it, without turning it into a personality. You reduce your choices. You create friction for your worst habits. You make the wrong path inconvenient. You put your phone where your hand cannot reach it without standing up like an adult. You decide ahead of time what your morning is for. You decide ahead of time what your evening is for. You decide ahead of time what your work block is for. And you treat those decisions like promises, not suggestions, because your mind will negotiate in the moment. It will argue. It will bargain. It will say just this once, and you deserve it. And you can start in 15 minutes, and this will only take a second. And if you obey every sentence your mind produces, you are not free. You are just responsive. You are just a puppet with fancy vocabulary. Look at me. Stay here. You do not need to become a monk. You do not need to remove every pleasure from your life. You need to stop letting pleasure drive. You need to put it in the passenger seat. Because when you let comfort drive, it never takes you to the place you actually want to live. It takes you in circles and then tells you the scenery is changing. Structure is not a prison. It is protection. It eyes a fence around what matters. It is a way of saying this time is sacred. And yes, that word makes people uncomfortable because they think sacred means fragile. But I mean sacred as in guarded, as in non-negotiable, as in you do not casually hand it away to whatever is loudest. You do not casually donate it to other people's emergencies when you have not even addressed your own responsibilities. And do not misunderstand me. Responsibility is not just work. Responsibility is how you speak, how you sleep, how you eat, how you react, how you treat people when you are frustrated, how you treat yourself when you fail. Responsibility is the art of being steady when you do not feel steady, and you can practice that in small ways that no one claps for. Like getting up when you said you would, like starting your hardest task first, like finishing a thing before opening a new thing, like keeping your word in private, because private integrity is the root system and public success is just the fruit. And you have been trying to staple fruit onto a tree with rotten roots, trying to look consistent without being consistent, trying to feel confident without earning confidence, trying to lead others while your own impulses lead you. You do not need to punish yourself into focus. You need to train yourself into focus. And training is repetitive, and repetitive is boring. And boring is exactly what your distracted brain avoids. So the first step is to stop treating boredom like an enemy and start treating it like a doorway. Because boredom is often the moment your mind stops being entertained and starts being useful. It is the moment you can finally hear what matters. The moment your thoughts stop being a crowd and start becoming a conversation. And yes, at first you will feel restless. You will feel the itch. You will feel the urgetto check to refresh, to see what you missed because your attention has been conditioned like a pet. But conditioning can be changed, and it changes the same way it was built. Repetition, choice, consequence, repetition again. You want deep focus? Then create deep conditions. Reduce the noise. Simplify the inputs. Set a timer. Commit to one task. Let it be awkward. Let it be slow. And do not run away when you meet resistance. Because resistance is not proof you are failing. Resistance is proof you are finally touching something that matters. Something real enough to fight back. And when you do that, when you start showing up to your own work like it is a responsibility and not a hobby, you will notice something that will almost make you angry. You were never broken. You were just untrained, and the world profited from you being untrained because an untrained mind is easy to sell to, easy to distract, easy to steer. And you have to decide if you want to be steered or if you want to steer, because no one is coming to guard your attention for you. Noon is coming to hand you the perfect environment. No one is coming to make it easy. And that is not unfair. That is simply adulthood. That is cost of being the author of your life instead of character written by your impulses. And when you slip because you will, you do not collapse into shame. Like shame is a ritual you must perform. You correct, you return, you rebuild the boundary. You treat it like training, not tragedy, because you are not here to be dramatic. You are here to be durable. You want to talk about failure like it is a monster under the bed, but you sleep with it every night. And still you pretend it is not there. You pretend you did not see the ways you sabotaged you-round progress, the ways you stopped when it stopped being exciting, the ways you abandoned a plan because you could not tolerate being a beginner, the ways you chose short-term relief over long-term respect. And I know you have reasons. You have a whole library of reasons. Reasons stacked so neatly they look like responsibility. But reasons do not build careers. And reasons do not rebuild reputations. And reasons do not create skill. Only repetition does. Only humility does. Only the willingness to look unimpressive while you get better does. And humility is not thinking less of yourself. Humility is accepting the process without needing applause for every step. You say you want to rebuild, but you keep treating rebuilding like a mood, like you will feel ready one morning and suddenly become consistent. And that is adorable because readiness is a costume your fear puts on to look wise. I'm not ready as often, just I'm afraid to start and see what happens. And fear always wants to be respected like it is a counselor. But fear is not a counselor. Fear is a liar with good posture. It stands tall and says, "What if you fail?" As if failure is a cliff you fall off once and never return. But failure is usually just feedback delivered in a harsh tone. And the mature response is not to panic. It is to adjust. You want to grow in your career. You want to lead. You want to be trusted. Then stop demanding perfect conditions and start becoming a person who can perform in imperfect ones. Because leadership is not a title. It is composure under pressure. It is the ability to keep your standards when your mood begs you to bargain. It is the ability to respond rather than react. And you know exactly how often you react, how often you let irritation side your words, how often you let frustration leak into your tone, and then you justify it because people are annoying, because life is stressful, because you're just being honest. But honesty without control is just impulse dressed up as virtue. And impulse is unreliable. Impulse will say things that burn bridges you later need to cross. Impulse will make you small in moments where you need to be steady. So you practice control, not because you are trying to be nice for the world, but because you are trying to be strong for yourself. Because strength is not loud. Strength is regulated. Strength is the ability to feel anger and still choose your action, to feel disappointment and still do your work, to feel rejected and still keep your dignity. Because dignity is not something people give you. It is something you keep, and you have been dropping it like loose change whenever someone triggers you, whenever someone doubts you, whenever someone ignores you, and you keep saying they made me, but no, you did. You handed your steering wheel to their opinion, and then you blamed them for the direction. Look at me, one more truth. Betrayal, disappointment, being overlooked, being underestimated, being left out. Those things happen, and they hurt. And I am not going to mock that hurt. I have seen what it does to a person, how it makes them suspicious, how it makes them guarded, how it makes them want to harden into someone who never needs anyone. But you do not need to harden into bitterness. You need to sharpen into clarity, because clarity says, I will not build my life on someone else's attention. Clarity says, I will not beg for respect I can earn. Clarity says, I will not surrender my discipline because I feel unseen. And this is where you stop being a victim of your story and become a steward of it. Because stewardship is responsibility without theatrics. It is the quiet work of repairing what you can repair and accepting what you cannot control, and then returning to the one area where you always have authority. Your choices. You can choose your standards. You can choose your schedule. You can choose your environment. You can choose your response. And yes, some days you will not feel like choosing. Well, some days you will feel tired, distracted, discouraged. But discipline is not the absence of those feelings. Discipline is what you do while carrying them. Discipline is the ability to keep moving, even when the soundtrack in your head is negative, even when your emotions are loud, even when your confidence is low. Because confidence is not a prerequisite. It is a reward, and it is earned with evidence. And evidence only comes from action. You want to rebuild after a mistake. Then start with the simplest, most unglamorous proof. Show up at the same time tomorrow. Do that same small set of actions again. Keep your promises small enough that you can actually keep them, because grand promises are often just a way to feel powerful without being consistent. And consistency is the only power that lasts. You want to become a person people trust, then become a person you trust. Because self-trust is the foundation of everything else. And self-trust is built in private in the moments no owner records, in the moments no one praises, in the moments where you could slip and no one would know, and you choose not to slip anyway, because you are tired of living with that quiet shame, tired of that internal eye roll you give yourself when you make the same excuse again, tired of being the person who understands everything and executes nothing. And do not misunderstand, execution is not just doing more. Execution is doing what matters. It is prioritizing. It is saying no to distractions that look urgent. It is focusing on skills that compound. It is learning to sit with discomfort long enough for mastery to develop. And mastery is slow. Mastery is repetitive. Mastery is humble. Mastery is the opposite of the quick scroll, the quick hit, the quick validation. Mastery is the long game. And you have been playing the short game, because the short game gives you instant feedback, even if it is empty, even if it is shallow, even if it leaves you hungry, and you keep choosing hunger, because at least hunger is familiar. So here is what you do when you feel that familiar pull toward the easy path. You pause, you breathe, You name the impulse, and you choose the next right action. Not the perfect action, not the heroic action, the next right action. Because a life is not rebuilt with a single grand decision. It is rebuilt with hundreds of small, almost boring decisions that stack into a new identity. And identity is not what you claim. Identity is what you repeat. And you are about to repeat something different. Even if you are scared, even if you are tired, even if you do not feel ready, because readiness is overrated and responsibility is real. And you are finally ready to be real. And when the room gets quiet, when there is no one to impress and no one to blame, and no one to rescue you from your own mind, that is when the real work begins. Because solitude is a mirror that does not flatter. Solitude shows you what you reach for, what you avoid, what you soothe, what you postpone. And you have been afraid of solitude because it exposes the distance between your values and your behavior. But that distance is not a life sentence. It is a measurement. And measurements can change slowly, patiently, with humility, with permanent, with a kind of steady gratitude that does not depend on having everything you want. Gratitude that says, I am still here. I still have time today. I still have breath. I still have a mind that can learn. I still have hands that can work. And that is not a slogan. Fate is fuel, because bitterness drains you. Comparison drains you. Constant complaint drains you. And you have been living drained and then wondering why your goals feel heavy. The long-term path requires a different kind of mind. A mind that can delay gratification. A mind that can accept slow progress without panicking. A mind that can plant seeds and water them without digging them up every day to see if they grew. And that impatience you carry, that itch for results, that hunger for proof, it is not evil. It is just undisciplined. It is just the part of you that wants certainty before commitment. And life does not offer that deal. Life offers commitment first and clarity later. And the people who build something meaningful are the people who can tolerate that order, who can work without applause, who can stay consistent through dull seasons, who can keep their standards when no one is watching, who can be patient without being passive, who can be ambitious without being arrogant, who can stay humble enough to learn and serious enough to apply. And let's talk about recovery, because you keep treating rest like something you earn only after you break yourself. You treat sleep like a negotiable luxury, like you can borrow from it forever with no interest. But the interest always comes. It comes as impatience, as sloppy attention, as emotional volatility, as low-quality decisions. And you do not need a lecture. You need a principle. Your future depends on the quality of your days. And the quality of your days depends on the quality of your nights. And not because sleep is magic, but because a discipline is holistic. Because self-control is harder when you are depleted. Because focus is harder when you are scattered. Because patience is harder when you are running on fumes. And if you want to be steady, you have to protect the basic foundations that make steadiness possible. You have to respect your limits without worshiping them. You have to recover with intention. You have to build rhythms that keep you durable. And no, that does not mean you never push. It means you push wisely. You push with awareness. You push with a long-term mindset instead of a short-term ego. Because ego wants to sprint and collapse and then brag about the sprint. But character wants to pace and finish and quietly return tomorrow. Look at me. Don't drift. You are not here to win a single day. You are here to win a decade. You are here to build a life that does not require constant escape. A life you can live in without needing to numb yourself every night. And that life is not built by intensity alone. It is built by consistency, and consistency is often unromantic. It is getting up when it is dark. It is doing the boring task before the fun one. It is choosing the harder conversation instead of the silent resentment. It is controlling your tongue when you are irritated. It is refusing to let anger become your identity, because anger is a spark and you can use it. But if you keep feeding it, it becomes a fire that consumes your relationships, your reputation, your peace, and then you will have to rebuild again from a pile of consequences you created with your own mouth. So you learn to pause. You learn to breathe. You learn to respond with strategy instead of reaction. You learn to separate what you feel from what you do, because feelings are real, but they are not rulers. And you have been letting them rule, letting them decide whether you work, whether you train, whether you study, whether you apologize, whether you forgive, whether you move forward. And feelings are too temporary to be given that kind of authority. So you reclaim it gently, firmly, with repetition, with patience, with the kind of quiet courage that does not announce itself. And yes, you will have nights where the old shame tries to speak, where the old failures try to replay, where the old regrets try to convince you. Nothing changes, but nothing changes only if you keep repeating the same day. And you are not going to keep repeating it. Not because you are suddenly fearless, but because you are finally tired of betraying yourself. Finally tired of the gap between your potential and your practice. Finally tired of waiting for permission to become disciplined. Defension that was never required because your life is yours to lead. And leadership begins when you stop making your comfort the priority and start making your character the priority. When you stop asking what do we feel like doing and start asking what kind of person am I becoming with what I'm about to do. And then you act accordingly again and again until acting accordingly feels normal, until your standards become your default. Until silence stops being a courtroom and starts being a sanctuary where your mind can rest. Because you have nothing left to hide. Because you handled what you needed to handle. Because you kept your word. Because you took responsibility. Because you chose patience over panic, gratitude over bitterness, structure over chaos. And in that quiet, the strongest kind of confidence grows. Not loud, not flashy, not begging to be seen, just steady, just rooted, just real. And you will feel it one night when you close your eyes and the world is still noisy. But your inside is not, because you finally became the kind of person who does not need constant noise to escape from yourself. The kind of person who can sit in the dark and not be afraid of your own thoughts, because your thoughts have learned to respect you again. Because you have proven slowly, honestly, that you mean what you say. And you will realize the quiet truth no one told you was never meant to break you. It was meant to free you. And freedom is not the absence of struggle. It is the presence of direction. It is knowing what you stand for and then standing for it. Even when it is inconvenient, even when it is lonely, even when no one applauds, because you are not an audience member in your own life anymore. You are the one building it brick by brick, decision by decision, breath by breath. And you are going to keep building and keep building until the person you used to be afraid you would never become is no longer a dream you whisper about, but a reality. You live so quietly, so consistently, that even your doubts start to lose their voice, and all that is left is work and patience and a calm kind of power that does not need to prove itself because it is already there. And it will keep going, and it will keep going, and it will keep going. Even when the night tries to convince you to stop, because you have finally learned how to turn night into discipline, and discipline into peace, and peace into strength, and strength into a life you can carry without breaking. And if you stay with me, if you stay honest, if you stay responsible, if you keep your attention guarded and your habits clean and your standards steady, you will notice something almost shocking. Something so quiet it feels like a secret. You were never waiting for rescue. You were waiting for your own decision. And now that decision has been made. So now you move, now you work, now you endure, now you return, and you do it again tomorrow. And the next day, and then X day, until the old you becomes a lesson, and the new you becomes a pattern, and the pattern becomes a path, and the path becomes your life. And your life stops asking for permission to be lived with strength. Because you finally decided to live it that way. And you do not need anyone to understand. You only need to keep going, keep going, keep going, until silence becomes strength. And strength becomes the most honest kind of smile. The kind that does not perform. The kind that does not beg. The kind that simply appears when you know deep down you did not run anymore. You did not drift anymore. You did not betray yourself anymore. You stayed. You worked, you owned it, you carried it. You became it, and you are still here, still standing, still choosing, still building, still returning, still snorts, choosing when you do not get a clean reward, still choosing when the day is ordinary, still choosing when your chest feels heavy for no dramatic reason, still choosing when your mind tries to sell you that old story, that you are too late and too tired and too far behind, because those are not facts. Those are invitations to quit, and you have accepted them too many times. You have treated invitations like commands, and now you are learning the difference. You are learning that a thought can be present without being obeyed, that an emotion can rise without being crowned, that discomfort can sit beside you without steering the entire vehicle off the road. And I know you want it to be easier than this. You want a smooth transformation. You want the kind of change that looks good on the outside and feels good on the inside at the same time. But you already know the truth. Most real change feels awkward. It feels quiet. It feels like walking into a room where you are not the expert anymore. And your ego does not like that. Your ego wants to be impressive, wants to be quick, wants to look like it belongs. And when it cannot, it tries to protect itself with excuses, with delay, with criticism, with cynicism, with that little smirk you use to pretend you do not care. That little smirk that says, "I didn't even want it anyway," when really, you wanted it so badly you were afraid to touch it, afraid you might stain it with your flaws, afraid you might discover you are ordinary and you have been running from ordinariness like it is a shameful verdict. When ordinariness is the starting line, ordinariness is where every skilled person begins, where every leader begins, where every disciplined life begins. And the difference is not that they were born with something you lack. The difference is they were willing to be ordinary long enough to become exceptional. And exceptional is not a spark. It is a schedule. It is what happens when you take your days seriously without making yourself dramatic, without needing to announce your struggle to make it feel real. You have been craving a witness for your pain, craving someone to validate how hard it has been. And I am not going to stealth that from you by pretending it is nothing, because it has been hard. It has been lonely. It has been confusing. It has been humiliating in the quiet way, where no one else sees it, but you feel it anyway. The way you feel it when you watch other people move forward and you tell yourself you are happy for them, while a small part of you wonders why you are still standing in the same place. And then you feel guilty for wandering, and then you push the guilt down, and then you scroll, and then you laugh at something you do not even find funny, and then you go to sleep feeling like you wasted a day again, and you call that normal. It is common, yes, but it is not normal for the person you are trying to become. And you cannot become that person by repeating the same coping patterns that kept you small. You cannot heal your life with the same habits that quietly harmed it. You cannot build a future with the same distractions that robbed your past. And you know this. You have known it. You have just been waiting for permission to take yourself seriously. Permission that never came because no one else can grant it. It is not a stamp on a form. It is a private decision that finally stops asking the world to approve. And here is what will sting. What will feel almost unfair. Nobody is going to feel the urgency the way you feel it because nobody lives inside your ribs. Nobody hears your thoughts at 2 a.m. Nobody feels that strange pressure of untapped potential like a hand on the back of your neck. So if you keep waiting for someone to match your urgency, to push you, to rescue you, to drag you into you-round life, you will keep waiting, and the waiting will become a habit. And the habit will become a personality. And then you will look up one day and realize you became an expert at delay, an expert at planning, an expert at understanding, and still a beginner at execution. Look at me. Stay here. You are not a child anymore. And that is not an insult. It is an opening because adulthood is not just paying bills and showing up and keeping a straight face. Adulthood is the willingness to carry your own future without being carried. Adulthood is the ability to say no one is coming and feel the weight of that sentence and still stand up anyway. still wash your face, still set the timer, still open the document, still do the work, still practice the skill, still reach out to the contact, still prepare for the meeting, still train your body, still read the page, still build the habit, still do what is necessary. Even when the emotional part of you throws its arms up and says, "What's the point?" Because the point is not to guarantee an outcome. The point is to become someone who is worthy of better outcomes. The point is to become someone you respect. And self-respect is not a feeling. It is a relationship you build with yourself through repeated honesty. You want to talk about leadership like it is charisma, like it is speaking well, like it is being confident in public. But leadership is what you do when you do not feel confident. Leadership is whether you keep your commitments when it would be easier to vanish, whether you speak with control when you are frustrated, whether you protect your attention so your work has quality, whether you stop yourself from reaching for cheap dopamine when your long-term goals are starving. Because if you cannot lead your own impulses, you cannot truly lead other people. You can only influence them for a moment, and influence without integrity is just performance. And performance is exhausting because you are always acting, always adjusting, always trying to keep the mask in place. Have watched you wear masks so long, you forgot what your face feels like, and you call it being professional. But professionalism is not pretending. Professionalism is steadiness. It is reliability. It is being the kind of person whose mood does not decide their ethics, whose frustration does not decide their behavior, whose boredom does not decide their effort. And you might think that sounds cold, but it is not cold. It is safe. It is safe for you and safe for others, because when you are regulated, you stop creating unnecessary chaos. You stop igniting little fires in your relationships. You stop turning every inconvenience into an emotional event. You stop making your own life harder with your own reactions. And yes, you are allowed to feel. You are allowed to grieve. You are allowed to be disappointed. You are allowed to be angry. But you are not allowed to let those feelings drive you into choices you will later regret. Because regret is expensive, and you have paid enough. This is where the discipline session becomes uncomfortable. Because I am not here to flatter you. I am here to hold up the mirror you keep turning away from. And the mirror says you have been living like your attention is infinite, like your energy is infinite, like your years are infinite, and you have been acting like consequences are something that happened to other people. But consequences are the most loyal thing in your life. They follow you quietly. They do not shout. They do not threaten. They simply arrive. And when they arrive, they do not ask what you meant. They ask what you did. So you start living like a person who respects cause and effect. You start living like a person who understands that every tiny choice is a vote for the kind of life you will have. Every tiny choice is a brick. And you do not get to complain about the building if you keep laying the same bricks. And listen, I know the temptation you have, the temptation to make this moment emotional, to turn it into a big vow, a big declaration, something dramatic you can feel proud of. But drama is often a substitute for discipline. And I want you beyond substitutes. I want you in the real thing, the plain unromantic thing, a simple plan followed consistently. You want to reclaim your days, then stop building a schedule around your distractions and start building it around your priorities. And priorities are not what you say they are. They are what your calendar proves they are. So you stop letting your morning be stolen by the world. You stop opening your mind to other people's noise before you have even set your own direction. You stop letting the first thing you do be consumption, because consumption sets a tone of passivity. It tells your brain, we are here to receive. And if you spend your whole day receiving, you end the day empty because you were not built to only receive. You were built to create, to contribute, to build, to serve, to improve. And when you do not, your soul feels wooster, and an unused soul becomes restless. And restless people become impulsive, and impulsive people become regretful. So you begin your day with intention, and intention does not need to be poetic. It can be simple. One meaningful task, one deep work block, one act of responsibility, one act of service, one act of physical discipline, one act of learning. And you do not have to do everything at once. You do not have to overhaul your entire life in a week. You just have to stop lying about what you can maintain because you have started 100 times with grand plans and quit because the plan was heavier than your current identity. So this time you start smaller than your ego wants and you stay longer than your mood wants. And that is how identity changes, not with fireworks, but with repetition. Look at me. Do not blink. Consistency is not a personality. It is a contract. And you sign it daily. And some days the ink feels thick and heavy. And some days it feels light. But you sign anyway because you are tired of being a person who only shows up when it feels easy. And while you are signing that contract, you also learn the art of recovery because you have been swinging between extremes, between bursts of effort and long collapses. And that cycle feels like ambition, but it is actually instability. It eyes a nervous system living in surges, and surges are not sustainable. And sustainability is the real wealth, not money, not status. Sustainability is the ability to keep going without burning out. The ability to keep learning without resenting the process. The ability to keep working without losing your humanity. And you build that with sleep discipline, with respectful evenings, with boundaries on screens, with a wind-down ritual that signals to your mind, we are done reacting, we are done consuming, we are done chasing. And if you think that is soft, that is because you have been taught to confuse self-neglect with toughness. You have been taught that being drained is a badge, but being drained is not a badge. It is a warning. And wise people listen to warnings before they become consequences. Wise people treat rest as a strategy, not an accident. And I am not giving you medical advice. I am telling you something simpler and older than any trend. Your discipline is only as strong as your recovery, because a tired mind reaches for easy comfort. A tired mind loses patience. A tired mind becomes reactive, and you cannot build a stable life with a reactive mind. You can only build a busy one. So you protect your energy the way you would protect something valuable. You protect it with boundaries, with routines, with saying no, with not pretending you can do everything, with not pretending you can be everywhere. Because you have been trying to be everything to everyone, and then resenting the world for taking you seriously, resenting the world for letting you offer more than you should have offered, and that resentment leaks out in your tone, in your impatience, in your bitterness, and you call it stress, but it is often poor boundaries. Learn this. Saying no is not selfish when the yes would make you unreliable. Saying no is leadership when it protects the quality of your yeses. And you need quality because you are rebuilding, and rebuilding requires integrity. And integrity requires alignment. And alignment requires fewer commitments, not more. You have been drowning in too many promises. And when you drown, you start dropping them. And every drop promise chips at your self-respect. So you make fewer promises and you keep them. And that is how you become strong again. Not by promising more, by honoring what you promise. Now about your career, because I can feel that quiet panic you carry. That fear that you missed your window. That fear that others are ahead. That fear that you are not marketable, not skilled enough, not polished enough. And you keep trying to soothe that fear with fantasy, with daydreams of sudden redemption. But redemption is usually slower. It is a long series of competent days. And competence is not glamorous. Competence is just doing the work well consistently, without needing to be special, without needing to be praised, without needing to be seen. And if you do that, doors open. Not because the universe is romantic, but because people trust what is reliable. People lean toward what is steady. People respect what is consistent. And you might not control how quickly others notice, but you do control how quickly you become undeniable. And being undeniable is not loud. It is quiet mastery. It is the person who shows up prepared, who communicates clearly, who meets deadlines, who learns fast, who owns mistakes, who stays calm under pressure, who does not gossip, who does not chase drama, who does not need to be the center, who can be trusted with responsibility because they have proven they can carry it. You want growth, then stop craving shortcuts and start craving skill, because skill compounds. Skill travels with you. Skill cannot be taken by trends, and you build skill with deep focus, with practice, with feedback, with humility. And humility is the part you hate, because humility means admitting you are not as good as you want to be yet. But yet is a powerful word. Yet keeps you moving. Yet turns shame into progress. Yet turns failure into a teacher instead of a judge. And when you get feedback, when someone corrects you, do not let your pride turn it into a wound. Let it become data. Let it become a tool. Because wounded pride makes you defensive. And defensive people stay stagnant. And stagnant people become bitter. And bitter people blame the world for their own refusal to learn. And there it is again. Blame, the most seductive comfort in the human mind. Blame that says it's not your fault. And sometimes it truly is not your fault. Sometimes you were treated unfairly. Sometimes you were ignored. Sometimes you were betrayed. Sometimes you were given less than you deserved. And I will not deny that. But here is the brutal clarity. Even when it is not your fault, it is still your responsibility to respond wisely, because you are the owner living your life. You are the one carrying the consequences. You are the one who suffers if you stay stuck. And that is not injustice. That is reality. And mature people work with reality instead of arguing with it. Look at me. Stay snorts awake. The world does not owe you an explanation that heals you. And waiting for that explanation is another form of delay, another form of begging, another form of making your peace dependent on other people's behavior. So you release the need tube understood by everyone. You stop trying to win the invisible trial in your head, where you rehearse arguments against people who are not even present. You stop feeding your mind with imagined conversations that only inflame you, because those conversations are a kind of emotional entertainment. They give you a hit of righteousness, a hit of superiority, a hit of I was right. But they do not build your life. They only build tension. And tension makes you tired. And tired makes you impulsive. And impulsive makes you regretful. And suddenly you are back in the cycle again, living the same week, repeating the same emotions, calling it complexity. Break the cycle by doing the simple thing. Return to your task. Return to your standards. Return to what you can control. Return to the quiet discipline that does not need to prove itself. And while you are returning, you also learn the art of emotional regulation, not as suppression, but as stewardship. Because emotions are like weather. They change, they pass. But if you build your house with no roof, every storm becomes a disaster. So you build a roof, you build routines, you build habits, you build safeguards. You build the ability to pause before you speak, to breathe before you respond, to take a walk before you explode, to write a draft and wait before you send. To ask yourself, will this matter in a week? To ask yourself, is my reaction proportional? To ask yourself, what would the calm version of me do right now? And you might think that sounds simplistic, but simplicity is often what saves you, because complexity can be a hiding place. Complexity can be an excuse to keep spiraling. And if you are carrying anger, if you are carrying resentment, if you are carrying disappointment, do not pretend it is not there. Acknowledge it, name it, and then decide what you will do with it. Because anger can become full for improvement, or it can become poison that stains everything. And the difference is what you feed. Whether you feed the narrative or you feed the action. Feed the action, because action is cleansing. Action is honest. Action turns your nervous energy into progress. And progress quiets the mind. Progress gives you evidence that you are not trapped. Evidence that you can change. And that evidence is more soothing than any distraction you have been using. And yes, it will be slow. And yes, you will want to rush. And yes, you will want to check for results too early. You will want proof. You will want applause. You will want to sing. But the sign is your behavior. The sign is whether you show up again tomorrow. The sign is whether you keep your boundaries tonight. The sign is whether you choose sleep instead of scrolling. The sign is whether you do the hard task first instead of bargaining. The sign is whether you keep your word when nobody knows. This is the part where you learn delayed gratification like it is a language. A language that says, I will trade a small comfort now for a stronger life later. And that trade will not always feel satisfying in the moment, but it will feel satisfying in the mirror. It will feel satisfying in the quiet. It will feel satisfying when you realize your days are no longer slipping through your fingers like sand, because you finally closed your hand around them with intention. And I know you were thinking about all the times you tried and failed, all the times you started routines and abandoned them, all the times you made a plan and then disappeared from it. And you are afraid that this is just another speech that will fade, another moment that will pass. And that fear is not irrational. It is based on evidence. But evidence can be replaced, and you replace it the same way you built it. With repetition, with small wins, with consistency, with not demanding that you feel transformed before you behave transformed. You behave first, you earn the feeling later. So tonight, when you finish listening to me, you do not make a grand vow. You do not open 10 tabs of productivity content. You do not write a dramatic manifesto. You choose one thing you will do tomorrow that proves you are serious. One thing that requires discipline. One thing that moves your life forward, and you do it early, before the world can steal your attention, before your mind can bargain. Because the morning is a doorway, and if you walk through it with intention, the rest of the day follows that direction more easily. And when you do that one thing, you will feel a small shift. Not fireworks, not a miracle, a small shift. Like a hinge moving, and that hinge is your identity beginning to turn. Look at me, one more truth. You are not here to be entertained into greatness. You are here to be forged into steadiness, and forging is heat and repetition. But it is not cruelty. It is refinement. It is the process of becoming reliable to yourself. And reliability is theorist form of confidence because it does not depend on praise. It depends on proof. And when the next wave of loneliness comes, because it will, when you feel like nobody understands the work you are doing in private, when you feel like people only notice your results and not your effort, do not let that loneliness turn you bitter. Let it turn you focused, because solitude can be either a prison or a workshop, and you decide which one it becomes by what you build inside it. Build your craft, build your body, build your mind, build your habits, build your character. Build your ability to sit with discomfort without panicking. Build your ability to stay calm when others are chaotic. Build your ability to listen before you speak, to think before you react, to plan before you rush, to review your week before it disappears. Because a reflection without action is just rumination. But reflection with action is strategy. And strategy is how you stop living on accident. And yes, you can still enjoy life. You can still laugh. You can still rest. You can still have lightness, but you stop using lightness as an escape hatch. You stop using it to avoid responsibility. You stop using it to numb the discomfort of growth. Because growth always has discomfort, and running from that discomfort is how you stay the same. You have been asking for a different life while protecting the habits that create the current one. And that is the quiet contradiction that has been tearing you apart. And now you are going to resolve it not with words, not with performance, but with quiet, consistent obedience to your own standards. Standards that are patient, standards that are realistic, standards that are firm without being cruel, standards that do not demand perfection, but do demand honesty. And when you fail, because you will sometimes, you do not collapse into shame. You do not throw the whole week away. You do not call yourself names. You do not dramatize it. You correct quickly. You return quickly because speed of return is maturity. And the faster you return, the less power failure has over your identity. And one day, not because I promise you a guarantee, not because life is a vending machine, but because discipline leaves patterns, you will look back and realize you became steadier without noticing, like a tree growing, quiet, gradual, undeniable. And you will realize the darkness that used to scare you became a place you could sit without fear because you filled it with purpose. because you stopped letting your mind wander into useless corridors, because you gave your days structure, because you treated your attention like something sacred, because you chose patience over panic, gratitude over bitterness, responsibility over excuses. And that is when the silence stops feeling like emptiness and starts feeling like strength. The kind of strength that does not need to shout. The kind of strength that does not need to prove. The kind of strength that simply keeps showing up, keeps breathing, keeps working, keeps returning, keeps choosing. Still the same hands, the same mind, the same 24 hours, but a different posture inside them. A different refusal to be carried away by whatever sparkles, because you're finally learning that distraction is not an accident. It is a habit you practiced until it felt like personality, and personality can bear a trained if you stop treating it like fate. You keep saying you want a meaningful life, but you keep feeding yourself meaningless inputs. And then you act offended when your thoughts feel shallow, when your attention feels thin, when your patience feels short, when your emotions feel loud, because you are what you repeatedly consume. Not just food, not just entertainment. I mean the thoughts you allow, the arguments you rehearse, the envy you entertain, the comparisons you secretly sip like a drink you pretend you do not like, because comparison is sweet at first and bitter later. It gives you a quick story. I am behind, I am less, I missed it. And then you use that story as an excuse to either panic or numb out. And both are just different costumes for avoiding the present. And you know what is most dangerous about comparison? It feels like truth. It feels like awareness. It feels like realism. But it is rarely accurate because you are comparing your inside to someone else's outside. You are measuring your messy private process against somebody's polished highlight. And your mind eats that like it is a balanced meal and then wonders why it feels sick, why it feels restless, why it feels dissatisfied. So you stop feeding it that not with drama, not with an announcement, not with a loud vow. You stop feeding it by choosing what deserves your attention. And attention is a choice, even when your habits pretend it is not. Even when your thumb moves like it has its own brain. Even when your eyes wander like they are pulled by strings. Because strings can be cut, and cutting them looks like small, stubborn decisions. Not checking the phone first thing. Not letting the algorithm side your mood. Not letting other people's urgency become your identity. Not letting the noise of the world enter your mind before you have even entered it yourself. You have been waking up and immediately leaving yourself, like a person who steps out of their own home and locks the door from the outside, and then spends the day wondering why they feel homeless. So you come back in, you reclaim the first hour, you claim the first breath, you reclaim the first thought, and you decide what the day is for before the world starts shouting suggestions. And yes, you will feel the itch, the little itch that says, check, refresh, see, because the modern world has trained you like a bell, trained a dog, and you have been obedient to the bell. But you are not an animal. You are a responsible adult. And responsibility is the ability to hear the bell and not run, to hear the impulse and not obey, to feel the urge and not surrender. And you do not have to hate the world to do this. You do not have to become bitter about technology. You just have to become intentional, because tools are either servants or masters. And you have been letting your tools become masters, letting them schedule your attention, letting them rearrange your priorities, letting them decide what you think about most. And what you think about most becomes what you feel about most. And what you feel about most becomes what you act in most. And that chain is either your liberation or your captivity. So break the chain where you can at the beginning, at the input, at the gate. Look at me. Don't drift. You do not need more information. You need better implementation. And implementation is the quiet art of doing the same simple things so consistently that your life changes shape without you noticing. Like water carving stone, not with force, with pertinent, with daily contact, with humble repetition. You want to be productive, but you keep asking productivity to feel exciting. And productivity is rarely exciting. It is mostly commitment. It is mostly showing up. It is mostly starting, even when you do not feel like starting, and finishing even when you want to wander. It is the discipline of completion. And completion is a kind of self-respect because an unfinished life is not just a life full of unfinished tasks. It is a life full of unfinished trust. Trust you never gave yourself agents to build because you kept abandoning yourself at the first sign of resistance. You have been using your mood as a weather report and also as a permission slip, and that is why your life feels unstable because weather changes. And if weather is your boss, your work will be inconsistent, your growth will be inconsistent, your relationships will be inconsistent, your promises will be inconsistent. And inconsistency creates a particular kind of anxiety, not a clinical thing, just the human tension of never knowing whether you can rely on you. And that tension follows you everywhere. It sits in your shoulders, it sits behind your eyes, it sits in the way you rush and then crash. The way you overcommit and then disappear. The way you feel guilty and then avoid. And the cycle repeats because the cycle is familiar. So you choose a different cycle. A cycle that looks boring at first. Wake, prepare, focus, finish, recover, repeat. And you protect those pillars like they are sacred because they are. They are the scaffolding that holds your ambitions long enough for them to become real. And do not confuse this with turning into a cold machine. Discipline is not coldness. Discipline is warmth that lasts, because undisciplined living feels warm for a moment and then leaves you empty. But disciplined living feels challenging at first and then gives you a steady peace. The kind of peace that lets you be present with people. The kind of peace that lets you listen instead of perform. The kind of peace that lets you lead without controlling because you are no longer scrambling inside. And leadership, yes, let's go there. Because you want to be respected. You want to be taken seriously. You want to be trusted. But you keep trying to earn trust through image, through looking busy, through looking confident, through saying the right things. And trust is not built by looking. It is built by doing. And doing begins when you stop needing to be seen as someone who has it together and start becoming someone who can put things together, even quietly, even privately, even imperfectly. Leadership is the ability to carry responsibility without turning it into a performance. It is the ability to make decisions that are unpopular with your short-term self, but beneficial for your long-term self. It is the ability to be calm when someone else is reactive, to be clear when someone else is confused, to be steady when someone else is dramatic. And the first person you must lead is you, especially the part of you that wants to lash out, the part of you that wants to quit, the part of you that wants to blame, the part of you that wants to run. Because those parts are not evil. They are just undisciplined. And undisciplined parts get loud when you are tired, when you are stressed, when you are hungry for comfort. So you learn to anticipate them, to prepare for them, to create rules that protect you from you. And rules are not oppression. Rules are compassion with backbone. You have been trying to rely on willpower alone, and willpower is fragile. Willpower is the candle in the wind. Environment is the lantern. Routine is the walls. And you need walls because you have been living with no walls and then calling every distraction a surprise visitor. You build walls by deciding when you work and when you rest, by deciding what gets your best hours, by deciding that your deepest work happens before the day gets messy, by deciding that your evenings are for recovery and reflection, not endless stimulation. Because stimulation at night feels like relief, but often steals your next morning. And mornings are where your discipline either begins or breaks. And if you cannot control your evenings, you will struggle to control your life, because the night is where you either reset or you unravel. The night is where you either close the loops or you leave them open. And open loops make your mind restless. And a restless mind reaches for easy comfort. An easy comfort is a thief that never gets caught because it leaves no obvious fingerprints. Only the slow disappearance of urge. Look at me. Stay awake. You keep thinking you need a giant purpose before you can be disciplined. You keep thinking you need a perfect vision statement, a dramatic calling, a moment of lightning. But purpose is often revealed after you commit to responsibility, not before, because responsibility sharpens you. It forces you to clarify what you value. It forces you to stop wasting time on things that do not align. And alignment is where purpose becomes visible. You have been waiting for purpose to arrive like a letter in the mail. But purpose is built like a house, one decision at a time, and the foundation is simple. Dowhat is right in front of you with excellence. Even when it is small, even when it is unseen, even when it is not glamorous. Because excellence is a form of gratitude. It is the way you honor the abilities you were given. It is the way you honor the opportunities you still have. It is the way you honor time itself. And when you do that, you begin to notice what you care about. You begin to notice what you are willing to suffer for in a healthy way, what you are willing to work for without needing constant reward, what kind of problems you feel drawn to solve, what kind of people you feel called to serve, what kind of legacy you want to leave behind. Not in statues and speeches, but in the quiet impact of being reliable, being helpful, being honest, being steady, being the kind of person who lifts the quality of a room simply by being regulated. You want to be strong, then be useful, because usefulness is a kind of strength that does not inflate the ego, it grounds it. Ange, you have been hurt, you have been disappointed, you have been overlooked, and part of you wants to hold on to that hurt like it proves something, like it justifies your withdrawal, like it gives you a right to be less engaged, less responsible, less hopeful. But hurt is not a certificate. It is not a license to become careless with your life. It is a wound that asks for wisdom. And wisdom does not mean pretending it did not hurt. It means refusing to let it define your future. You do no heal by rehearsing the betrayal until it becomes your identity. You heal by building a life so disciplined and so aligned that the betrayal becomes a chapter, not the title, a lesson, not a life sentence. And do not confuse forgiveness with weakness. Forgiveness is not approving what happened. Forgiveness is refusing to keep paying for it every day, refusing to keep handing it your attention like a daily offering. Because attention is where your life lives. And if you give your attention to old wounds all day, your life will feel like a hospital hallway, endless, sterile, cold. And you will wonder why you cannot create anything new. You are allowed to remember, but you do not have to live there. And the way you stop living there is by filling the present with meaningful work, with healthy structure, with habits that build you, with relationships that are respectful, with boundaries that protect your peace. And boundaries will offend the version of you that wants to be liked by everyone. Because the version of you that wants to be liked treats everyone's comfort as your job. And that job will drain you. It will make you resentful. It will make you bitter. It will make you inconsistent because you will keep saying yes to things that steal from your priorities. And then you will secretly punish people for accepting your yes. And that quiet punishment shows up as sarcasm, as scoldness, as delay, as passive irritation, as emotional distance. So you stop doing that. You stop being the kind person who says yes and then disappears. You become the honest person who says no with respect, and then shows up fully where you chose yes. And yes, people might not like it at first, but people will learn what you allow. They will learn what you tolerate. And you are done tolerating what drains you. You are done because you finally understand that your life is not a rehearsal. It is not a draft. It is not a practice run where you can be careless with time and attention and character, and then magically become a disciplined later. Later is built by now, and now is built by the next choice. Look at me. Don't blink. There is a quiet discipline that lives under your habits, and it is not loud. It is not dramatic. It does not demand a spotlight. It simply does what it said it would do, and that discipline is what you are becoming. And it begins with the smallest, most private acts of integrity. Putting your phone away when you said you would. Closing the day with reflection instead of noise. Preparing your workspace the night before like you respect your morning. Doing the hard task before you reward yourself. Eating with intention instead of impulse. speaking with control instead of heat, pausing before you respond, and when you fail, returning quickly, not with shame, with ownership. And as you build this, you will feel a new kind of loneliness, a strange one, because you will start to outgrow the version of you that used to bond with people through complaint, through distraction, through shared procrastination, through shared cynicism. And at first, that outgrowing will feel like loss, because part of you will miss the old ease, the old jokes, the old comfort of being understood in your stagnation. But stagnation is not a home. It is a waiting room, and you have been sitting there too long. You will need to get comfortable being misunderstood for a season while you rebuild, because rebuilding is quiet, and most people only understand results. And if you chase validation during the process, you will start performing again, and performance will distract you from the work. So you keep it private, you keep it steady, you let your progress speak later. Not because you are hiding, but because you are protecting something fragile at first, your new pattern. And this is where resilience grows, not as a slogan, but as a practice. Resilience is the ability to keep your standards through disappointment, through boredom, through slow progress, through days where nothing exciting happens, through weeks where you feel like you are pushing a heavy cart uphill and nobody notices. And you keep pushing anyway, because you are not doing it for applause. You are doing it for alignment. You are doing it for the quiet dignity of a life that makes sense. And that life will begin to make sense when your habits match your values, when your calendar matches your goals, when your evenings match your mornings, when your words match your actions, when your emotions are acknowledged but not obeyed, when your attention is guarded, when your work is deep, when your recovery is intentional, when your relationships are clean and respectful, when your boundaries are firm and kind. And you will notice something else. Something almost embarrassing. You were not as trapped as you thought. You were just distracted. You were just tired. You were just unstructured. You were just living without a clear code. And a person without a code becomes a person of impulse. And impulse is a terrible architect. So you write your code in actions, not words. And the code is simple. Show up. Do the work. Tell the truth. Control your tongue. Guard your attention. Honor your recovery. Be patient. Be grateful. Be useful. Return when you fail. Repeat. And repetition will make you strong in a way motivation never did. In a way hype never did. In a way temporary confidence never did. Because repetition builds evidence, and evidence builds calm. And calm builds power. And power builds a life you can carry.